Michigan State versus Alabama, New Year's Day. Marco, who do you like and why?
I've got a weak vote in this game to Alabama, and the only reason it's a weak vote, RJ, is I'm a little bit concerned about the Alabama motivation. Here's a team that played for the national championship last year, was at the end of the year, the day after Thanksgiving, the big game against Auburn where they blew a 21 or 24-point lead, and now have to go to a bowl like this. How do they pick themselves back up off the mat?
Okay, so Dustin, producer Dustin, be ready for a little head-to-head here because we have a disagreement. I think that you're probably a level too shallow in your analysis here, kind of like your poker game a little bit. I think that it's the Marco coined phrase is the dream crusher, is anytime a team has a dream, when it's crushed, the next game and maybe even the next game are problematic motivationally. Well, Alabama's dreams have been crushed for quite a while. And there's Nick Saban. Some people call him Nick Satan. A lot of intensity there. And if you believe that he's going to allow this team, and again, that's always tough because you could have said the same thing about when Utah crushed them in the Sugar Bowl a few years ago. But I think this is my next level thinking on this game is that Alabama's had their dreams crushed. They also had a chance at redemption against Auburn. And I just don't believe that this team is going to come in. So, I mean, if they literally get beat again, it's going to be a black mark upon the entire program, I feel like. And my gut feeling is you're going to get a high motivation. And let's be honest, this line has got to be shocking to those who don't understand Vegas. If you're a guy that only looks at, the ESPN talk and all this stuff, is Michigan State was undefeated for a lot of the season. BCS-wise, they're number 9. And you've got Alabama as a double-digit favorite. I think that Vegas is telling us here, one is they're not afraid of Michigan State action. This line, I think this line could be 7.5 and probably, get fairly split action, you would think. And it seems to me they're welcome. They want Michigan State here.
Well, all year I've been on the bandwagon saying Michigan State's an overrated team. If you recall, whenever they had their first loss, that happened to be my game of the year with Iowa, and I just don't like this defense.
But let's think about that now. Iowa was at home a 6.5-point favorite. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that means that Iowa's 3.5 points better on a neutral. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So my question is, now you're 10 on a neutral. So Alabama's 7 points better than Iowa? And if so, it just feels like that there's a premium on this game to me.
There is the line. You look at it, the line's high, and it's why I am siding to the Alabama side. But, I just worry.
No, I thought you were siding to Michigan State.
No. I like Alabama here. I have Alabama winning by 12.
Okay, so you're set. All right, but your whole pitch at the beginning was you don't know about Alabama's
motivation.
That's
why I said that it's a weak vote for me, because my question mark is, fundamentally, I love Alabama. If Alabama would have beat Auburn, this would have been a contender for my game of the year for the Bulls, because matchup-wise, Michigan State's going to have some real problems.
So you're looking at that Auburn loss as a negative to their motivation.
Right.
I'm looking at it as a positive. And I mean, maybe that and one of the things I talked about in a recent webcam I did is an overriding handicapping factor. That until you answer that question, and I've been kind of cold lately, but I was right about the Giants, not necessarily, the question of their motivation against the Packers last week. But to me, until you answer that question in that Giants game, are they going to play up to potential? The handicapping yards per carry and all that stuff, it doesn't matter. So my question here is you're right. If Alabama comes in flat, you're getting a ton of value. If Alabama comes in on Michigan State, if Alabama comes in strong, it's hard to say that Alabama's not going to win this game by double digits. So maybe that's really all the handicappers out there need to figure out.
One other factor in the game that we didn't talk about, not that Nick Saban, anybody's going to, be sending him a lot of Christmas cards, but the coach for Michigan State was an assistant under Nick Saban for several years. So there is some familiarity between the two.
And where do you see that advantage being?
Well, if he, does Nick run it up on his former?
Well, this is a bowl game, and this is 10 points. So, I mean, at what point are you gonna be up 17 with 8 minutes and not be trying? So to me, if the line was 24, I think running up's an issue. At a 10-point line going down, I don't think it is. But that brings up another good point, is the wise guys are betting the dog here, the non-public team. So it opened 11, moved to 10. So our typical approach is if the wise guys bet with the perceived public side, it could be a true position or it could be trying to get ahead of a bigger move for a buyback later. If they bet on the non-public side, it's a genuine move most of the time. This seems to be a genuine move.
I would agree with that, yes.
All right. Now, that brings up a point that I brought up in a podcast I did just recently on ESPN with Chad Millman, a friend of Pregame. We did a 40 minutes. I thought it was really good stuff. And actually, you can visit pregame.com, and there's a link up on top of the page of this free podcast. We're talking about the concept that if you define a genuine wise guy move early, and then it's against the public, oftentimes on game day, the public will get that line back to where the wise guys originally really liked it. So now you can bet the wise guy's side at the same number, which is key. I look at this as a great potential of that. If I had to ask you, do you think this line has a better chance to go into 9.5 on game day or 10.5, what would you say?
Because of public perception of teams, I would go 10.5.
Now, though 11 isn't 10.5, 11's not a key number.
Right.
Is at 10.5, you're pretty much
the same.
Betting this game. Not the same, but close.
Right.
And again, it might get to 11. At 11, you can play Michigan State at the same side the wise guys, at the same number the wise guys did. That doesn't, let me ask you, Michigan State's motivation. Because this is a team that, if anything, maybe it's not even so much Alabama's going to have a lot of motivation. Maybe it's going to be just an average or above average. But isn't Michigan State in a trap here? It's a team that should have made the BCS. Or at least if you would have said entering the year, there's not many times you're going to have 3 one-loss teams in a major conference like the Big Ten. Don't they have to be disappointed?
That's a good point. The other point that, that I've read with some of them is that the team wants to, if they win this game, they got a shot of finishing in the top 5, which is, a feather in their cap, because Michigan State's never been a powerhouse. That's one of their motivations. But great point about the 3 teams finishing in a tie, and because of their quirky tiebreakers that they have in the Big Ten, they're not the team that went with the BCS stuff and that. So good point. I can't disagree with you on their motivation there.
Okay, here's what's a little bit surprising. People tend to think that Michigan State's been a team that maybe beats up on the little sisters of the poor, as Gordon Gee said, the Ohio State president. But really, they're 5 of 6 ATS against winning teams. So I just wonder if that physicality gap that you seem to see in your handicap is as true. The Big Ten ended up being a fairly good conference this year, and this team lost 1 game in the Big Ten. Is it the fact that they've just had a number of fluky wins late that maybe skews that number?
I think when I looked at Michigan State, the way I viewed them this year, it wasn't the physical teams that gave them the games. It was the teams that could throw the ball. And I think Alabama with McElroy is going to be able to throw the ball. And once they do, because Michigan State's going to come in and try to stop the running game first. And I think Saban's going to have some good play action passes to go for some, deep hits early. Once the passing game, they get a couple quick hits, then they're going to go back to that power running game with that 1-2 punch that Alabama has. I just think the balance that Alabama has, Michigan State's not used to that kind of offense in the Big Ten.
Did you give your projection?
I did. Alabama 35-23.
All right, close the line. Remember, guys, best lesson you can learn from this video, most games the line is pretty close to being right, especially after the wise guys have touched it up. And if you're playing more than 25% of the bowl games, it better be for recreational purposes, because there's not value on, I would say at most 25% of the games. And for us to force picks here would be doing you a disservice. By us telling you we think the number's about right, that is value, because remember, a game in which you avoid a loser is worth even more than gaining a winner, because with a loser you have to pay the juice. All right, it's your turn to continue the conversation in the comment section with Marco and me. And next up, we'll be looking at the Rose Bowl and my best bet of the week, TCU, Wisconsin.